Alvin Virtual Learning asynchronous assignments should function primarily as learning extensions, as homework, or as projects. These are activities that you want the students to complete that don't require interactivity with you. They don't really benefit from your presence. They're practice or work that the students can do completely independently, and it is important to remember that they will not count toward the 4 hours of synchronous instruction time that TEA is requiring us to engage in with our students. That synchronous instruction has to be direct instruction, it has to be engaging, it has to include teacher and student interaction. That's what's going to be taking place primarily in our meets, and it's important for us to recognize that while we may expect students to spend some extra time practicing reading or doing any one of a number of other things that support our core curriculum, that does not count towards our 4 hours of instruction time. These asynchronous assignments can include instructional videos that you create in order to support instruction to your students, in order to help guide them in the directions that you would like them to go, or to prevent you from having to repeat instruction multiple times by recording a simple video that students can watch at any need they have or when they need to be reminded about what's going on in the assignment. Do keep in mind that the asynchronous portion of our classes needs to support our core instruction and does not count towards the 4 hours of direct instruction that we're expected to give our students. As we engage in the Alvin Virtual Learning setting, it's important to consider more than a few things, some of which overlap, but all of which will have a powerful impact on the quality of your students' experience. The first is, as always for teachers, teaching procedures. Procedures are incredibly important in the classroom when we are physically present with students. They are going to be equally important as we are online and in remote locations. We're going to need to teach students how to take a picture of things, how to turn things in digitally, how to remember to mark assignments completed in Google Classroom. Any number of things that you want to perform with your students that you would spend time teaching them procedurally in the first days of school, you should consider taking the time to teach procedurally virtually so that they can enjoy the online environment in an organized way, the same way that they enjoy your classroom environment and its organized procedures. The next few considerations overlap. They all have to do with the environment in which you're teaching. You're going to be teaching from your classroom, but your classroom, each person's classroom, is a unique environment, and they vary from each other subtly in the placement of windows, in whether or not students pass by on the way to PE or on the way to the cafeteria. And so you should consider carefully what adjustments and what variables occur in your environment that you may be able to mitigate in order to improve the experience for your students. You certainly don't want the microphone facing the door when the class passes by that's noisy on the way to the cafeteria. You would rather arrange your room in such a way that you minimize those kind of environmental impacts. Sound considerations, although I just discussed noise outside the classroom that may interrupt what you're trying to conduct with students, the quality of your sound is also critically important. If students can't understand or hear what you're saying, it's going to be very difficult to engage with them meaningfully online. If you've been in a meeting in the past, you can't hear what the person's saying, you very quickly become distracted with things that are going on around you in your immediate environment and become disengaged from what's going on in the computer environment on the screen in front of you. So do make sure that you test everything that you can. Test your microphones, test the multiple placements of your computer in the room so that you can get the best sound. Consider doing that, especially if you plan to be using your computer at a semi-remote location, 5 or 6 feet away from you and pointing at you while you work on the board or something along those lines. You will want to consider the quality of the sound that your students are going to receive. You may make some test recordings and see what that is like. Video considerations are also important. The backlighting, the arrangement of the ceiling lights in the room, whether or not you are shaded or in shadow. If students can't see you, you are as difficult to access to them as if they cannot hear you. So they will very much appreciate, just as you do, being able to see the person you're talking to. If you've got windows, not every classroom has the luxury of having windows, but if you've got windows in your classroom, you're going to want to make sure that the backlighting is not excessive and you do not just appear as a silhouette when you are presenting to students. You will also want to compare that morning to afternoon, because depending on when you're in front of a window in a classroom, there can be a substantially different impact on visibility and on the way the camera treats that window. So do test those things and make sure that you are satisfied with the arrangement of the classroom for video purposes before we get into the rooms and start working with students. Also, do consider the time considerations. We are required to teach for 4 hours with students, but you know that it's going to be difficult for some students to have that kind of endurance to sit and watch 4 hours of direct video instruction every single day the first day we do it. So what I'm suggesting is we might start our coursework with students in a way that is going to allow us to build rigor as we move forward, so that we can have more rigorous and more engaging and more meaningful lessons with students as we move forward. But we do have time to build their endurance a little bit while we teach procedures and some of the things that introduce students to the classroom and to a new school year. Finally, I want you to consider assessments and what those are going to look like in the classroom. Each core subject area is going to have a different kind of approach and take on what their assessments are going to look like. I don't really have that information to know exactly what that's going to look like for each department, or what our standardized tests are going to look like, or what that distribution is going to look like for this new school year. But it is something for you to consider and have conversations about with both your fellow teachers and your curriculum directors. So these are just a few things, again, to consider as you go into setting up for an Alvin virtual learning experience in your classroom. I hope that this process was a little useful for you and you're able to digest and make use of some of these suggestions.